Cesar Millan has become famous as the dog whisperer, the man who can tame the most untrainable dogs. But now he's being sued, accused of having a pit bull that bit humans and even killed Queen Latifah's dog. Our requests to Millan and Queen Latifah for comment were unanswered in court documents.
For 9 years, one man walked into homes full of terrified families, barking walls of fur, and dogs that had already bitten someone, and he fixed them, calmly, without raising his voice, without flinching. Cesar Millan turned dog training into appointment television and built a career that stretched across 80 countries. At its peak, 11 million Americans watched every single week. And then, without warning, it all collapsed. The show collapsed under the weight of lawsuits piling up from multiple directions at once. Animal welfare organizations demanding it be taken off air, a money war between the people who built the show, and a personal breakdown that the cameras never captured. From $100 to a global stage, before the cameras, before 11 million viewers, before any of the lawsuits, there was a 21-year-old from Culiacan, Mexico, standing at the United States border with $100 his father had handed him and a destination he had picked out from American television programs. Cesar Millan had grown up watching Lassie and Rin Tin Tin on a television screen in Mexico and had decided by the age of 10 that he wanted to be the greatest dog trainer in the world. He had spent his childhood on his grandfather's farm, where animals responded to him in a way they did not respond to other people. No chasing, no raised voice. He simply moved through space, and the dogs understood that nothing was a threat. That instinct was real, and it could not be taught in any school he could afford. Veterinary school was never possible. His family did not have that kind of money. So the plan was simpler and more dangerous. Get to Hollywood, find the best dog trainers working with celebrity animals, and learn from them directly. On December 23, 1990, he said goodbye to his mother and got on a bus heading north. What waited at the border was not a clean crossing. He has described the area around the border as one where human traffickers operated and where danger was more likely than a simple fence to climb. He crossed anyway. He arrived in California speaking almost no English, carrying money that would run out in days, knowing nobody. He ended up briefly homeless in San Diego, sleeping in a dog kennel where he had talked his way into a job and eating out of dumpsters. The dogs in that kennel were cleaner and better fed than he was. He moved to Los Angeles, found work grooming and walking dogs in Inglewood, and built a dog walking business that was effective enough to attract the attention of the Los Angeles Times, which ran a piece about him. Wealthy Los Angeles dog owners found him through that article. Word spreads the way it only spreads when something genuinely works. His connection to Jada Pinkett Smith happened when she watched him work with a dog belonging to someone in her circle. She became a true believer immediately and told him directly. If he was ever going to reach television, he needed to speak English at a level that could be carried through a camera lens. She sent a tutor to his apartment in South Central the next day. He studied deliberately, surrounding himself with English speakers and staying away from Spanish-speaking communities until the language became something he could think in rather than translate into. He later credited her without hesitation. Because of Jada, he said, he spoke English. In 2004, production company MPH Entertainment built a television pitch around what he was already doing with celebrity dogs across Los Angeles. On September 13, 2004, Dog Whisperer with Cesar Millan premiered on the National Geographic Channel. Almost nobody noticed. The network barely promoted it. It aired in short 30-minute slots with almost no primetime presence. Word of mouth did what the marketing department did not bother to do. By season 2, it had been expanded to a full hour in prime time. By season 6, 11 million Americans were watching every week. In 2009, 18 years after crossing that border with $100, Cesar Millan became a United States citizen. The science that was already waiting to destroy him. The scientific community did not wait for the show to become successful before raising concerns. The criticism started almost immediately and never stopped building. Cesar Millan built his entire method on a concept he called calm assertive energy. The core of his philosophy was that dogs think in terms of a pack structure with a leader at the top. When a dog behaves destructively or aggressively, he argued, it is almost always because the human in the household has failed to establish themselves as the pack leader. The dog fills the vacuum with dominant behavior, anxiety, or aggression. His job was to walk in, become the calm and assertive presence the dog required, and restore that natural order. On television, this was gripping to watch. A dog that had been terrorizing a family for years, going quiet and settled within a single afternoon session, looked like genuine magic. The idea of natural hierarchy made intuitive sense to millions of viewers watching from their sofas. The explanations were simple, visual, and satisfying. That combination made for extraordinary television and for a theory that felt unshakable. The problem was that the underlying science had been falling apart for years before the show ever aired. Dr. Nicholas Dodman, director of the Animal Behavior Clinic at Tufts University, wrote a letter directly to the National Geographic Channel in 2006 to tell them that the show had set dog training back by 20 years. Mark Durr, a respected writer on animal behavior, published a piece in the New York Times the same year arguing that the methods shown on the program directly contradicted what professional animal behaviorists and trained veterinarians had established about how dogs actually behave. The specific target of both critics was dominance theory. The wolf studies that dominance theory was originally built on, it turned out, had been conducted on captive wolves in artificial conditions, not on natural wolf packs in the wild. When researchers observed wolves in their actual environments, leadership within wolf families was exercised by parent figures in family units, not through aggressive dominance over rivals. The entire alpha dog model, the framework Cesar had built his whole television career upon, was resting on a foundation that the scientific community had already determined to be incorrect. The American Humane Association went further than academic criticism. In 2006, they formally requested that the National Geographic Channel cancel the show entirely, calling the training methods inhumane, outdated, and improper, and arguing the program was sending viewers dangerously wrong messages about how to handle problem dog behavior. The American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior issued a public statement in 2009 warning that dominance-based training could cause fear and aggression in dogs rather than resolve them. In 2012, British television host Alan Titchmarsh directly confronted Cesar on camera, playing a video that he said showed Cesar striking a dog in the throat and quoting the RSPCA position that the methods compounded behavioral problems rather than resolving them. Cesar replied that the footage showed a touch, not a punch, and pushed back on every criticism. His counter-argument was not without substance. He had worked with hundreds of genuinely dangerous animals across 15 years, not just in edited television, but in real situations where theory was no substitute for instinct. The academics critiquing him, he pointed out, understood research, but had never sat across from an animal weighing 90 pounds with a genuine history of biting and had to make a decision in that moment. That was a fair point. The truth behind the lawsuits against Cesar Millan. The first major lawsuit came in 2006, barely 2 years into the show's run. Television producer Flody Suarez filed a claim in Los Angeles Superior Court, alleging that his 5-year-old Labrador retriever, Gator, had been injured at Cesar Millan's Dog Psychology Center. The complaint described the dog being choked with a collar, forced onto a treadmill, and overworked until the animal was rushed to a veterinarian in critical condition. Suarez said Gator was found bleeding from the mouth and nose, covered in severe bruising, in an oxygen tent, gasping for breath. The medical bills alone exceeded $25,000. The lawsuit was settled a year later, but the details were already public. That same week in April 2006, a second lawsuit landed from a former publicist and her partner, who claimed they had originally conceived the name Dog Whisperer for Cesar and that he had taken the show concept directly to National Geographic and 2 production companies without their knowledge. They were seeking more than $5 million in damages. 2 lawsuits in 1 week, in the show's second season, was not a coincidence. It was an early signal that the legal environment around the show was going to be a persistent problem. But the lawsuit story that has been almost completely overlooked in most coverage of the cancellation is the money war inside the production itself. Cesar Millan sued MPH Entertainment, the production company that created the show, claiming they had misappropriated back-end profits from the series. MPH and its production partner filed counterclaims. The network then revealed it had been distributing episodes on Hulu since 2009 without proper authorization. An independent audit allegedly found that Cesar himself had shorted his financial obligations to the production company by more than $4 million. By the time the show's final season aired in 2012, multiple parties were in active legal disputes with each other simultaneously. Cesar was suing MPH. MPH was countersuing. National Geographic was trying to join the suit to recover what it claimed were millions in underpaid revenues. The author of the Dog Whisperer book series was suing MPH separately for breach of fiduciary duty and fraud. The year everything fell apart for Cesar Millan. All of the external pressure, the scientific criticism, the lawsuits, the advertiser concerns, all of it was real and significant. But none of it was what actually broke Cesar Millan. That happened in 2010, and it happened fast. Daddy died in February of that year. Daddy was a 16-year-old pit bull who had been Cesar Millan's most important working partner for the entire run of the show. He was not simply a television prop or a trained animal used for demonstrations. Daddy was a dog, so naturally calm, so instinctively good at diffusing tension in anxious or aggressive animals, that Cesar used him as a living model of what balanced dog energy actually looked like in practice. He had been with Cesar through the early years in Los Angeles before the show existed, through every season of the program, through every crisis and controversy. Losing Daddy was, by Cesar Millan's own account, like losing a part of himself that could not be replaced. 4 months later, his wife Illusion filed for divorce. They had been married for 16 years and had 2 sons. The marriage had been the one stable, private space in a life that had been entirely public for almost a decade. When it ended, the ground disappeared completely. Cesar described the period with unusual directness when he eventually spoke about it. He said he felt defeated, with a large sense of guilt and failure, at the lowest level he had ever been, emotionally and psychologically. The man who had spent 9 years on television demonstrating calm, assertive energy, teaching families to be the stable, grounded presence their animals needed, could not locate any stability or calm inside himself. He experienced a mental health crisis. He overdosed on pills and was found unconscious. He survived, He declined medication in the recovery period and chose instead to rebuild through exercise and by returning to the work that had always given his life structure. He has spoken about the attempt publicly and with characteristic directness. "What does not kill you makes you stronger," he told the Tampa Bay Times. He said surviving the experience changed how he understood the signs of depression, and that as a father, he now watches for those signs in his sons and the people around him with an attention he would not have had before. The hidden reason the show actually ended. Most coverage of the dog whisperer cancellation frames it as a story about controversy and declining ratings. Both of those factors were real, but the financial and legal chaos happening inside the production simultaneously has been almost entirely ignored, and it is arguably the most decisive factor in the cancellation. The relationship between Cesar Millan and MPH Entertainment, the production company that had discovered him and built the show around him, had deteriorated into open legal warfare by 2012. Cesar claimed MPH owed him back-end profits from the series. MPH claimed the opposite and alleged that an independent audit found Cesar had actually underpaid his obligations to them by more than $4 million. National Geographic Channel, discovering that episodes had been distributed on Hulu without authorization since 2009, moved to join the litigation to recover what it claimed were millions of dollars in revenues it should have received. At the same moment, a second internal lawsuit from the show's book author was working through the courts, alleging fraud and breach of fiduciary duty against MPH leadership. That complaint described the company's principals as having maneuvered to give themselves blanket indemnity against all financial liabilities connected to the show. Consider what this means for the National Geographic Channel as an institution. On one side of the room, a show that major scientific organizations have publicly called dangerous and outdated, backed by declining ratings and growing advertiser discomfort. On the other side of the room, a production structure that has fractured into multiple simultaneous lawsuits with the star, the production partner, the network itself, and the book author all in active legal conflict with each other. No network renews a show under those conditions. The risk calculation was not close. The cancellation was announced in June 2012. Cesar confirmed it on Facebook with a gracious statement that said almost nothing about the actual reasons. 12 final episodes aired in July and August. The show ended on September 15, 2012, after 9 seasons and 176 total episodes. What research later revealed about it all, the critics who called Cesar Millan dangerous were not entirely right. The defenders who called him a misunderstood genius were not entirely right either. What happened in the years after the show ended was a genuine shift in how animal behaviorists understood the gap between what Cesar did on television and what actually produced results. The dominance theory critique was largely valid. The original wolf research was flawed. Dogs do not organize themselves into rigid alpha hierarchies the way the theory described. The scientific consensus moved firmly against that framework in the years after the show ended. But researchers studying the actual outcomes of the show's cases found something more complicated. A portion of the dogs Cesar worked with showed genuine long-term behavioral improvement. A portion showed temporary suppression of symptoms through aversive techniques that returned or worsened over time. The results were inconsistent in ways that pointed to a real problem. The methods worked on some animals and caused problems in others. And the television format made it almost impossible for viewers at home to identify which category their own dog fell into. This is the detail that the show's warning disclaimer was actually pointing toward. The on-screen notice telling viewers not to attempt these techniques at home was not a routine legal protection. It was an acknowledgement by the network itself that the methods being demonstrated were not universally safe to replicate, and that acknowledgement was visible in the credits of every single episode for years, while the network continued to air the content and collect the advertising revenue. Where Cesar Millan went, and what it reveals about him. After the cameras stopped, Cesar Millan did something that his critics did not expect, and that most of his fans did not predict either. He got better, not in the passive sense of recovering from a difficult period. He rebuilt actively and in public, in ways that actually challenged some of the assumptions the show had built around him. Cesar Millan Live, the touring stage production he launched after the cancellation, worked with shelter dogs in front of live audiences. Animals that had never met him, carrying genuine behavioral issues, with no editing to smooth over the moments when things did not work on the first attempt. For a man whose critics had always argued that the television format concealed the real complexity of what he was doing, performing live with unpredictable rescue cases was the most direct possible response to that criticism. In 2014, Cesar 911 on Nat Geo Wild returned to television with a focus on emergency cases, animals in what Cesar called the red zone, and dogs whose behavior was dangerous enough that their owners were days away from surrendering them. That show ran for 4 seasons. A YouTube channel he built accumulated more than 1 million subscribers. He fell in love again and became engaged to a woman named Jahira Dar, proposing to her in Athens in front of the Acropolis. The most revealing development came in 2021. National Geographic, the same network that had ended Dog Whisperer 9 seasons and nearly a decade earlier, brought him back with a new show called Better Human, Better Dog. The ending of The Dog Whisperer remains one of the most talked about moments in TV history. Behind its success lies a story filled with surprising turns and untold reasons for its conclusion. For more deep dives into shocking entertainment stories and hidden truths, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for upcoming uploads and updates.